Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Alexi the Greek.
I'm Ryan Cooper. Today we're doing a little bit of a newsy episode. We're checking in on Gaza and state and national politics. That is in this week's episode. But before we break into it, first of all, I want to say R.I.P. Matthew Perry. I'm sure listeners probably have seen this already.
Absolutely.
But when I was a kid in the 90s, growing up, Friends was absolutely ubiquitous. Everyone watched it. And even though I did not like the show at all, really, I thought it was a little too lowbrow for me, anti-intellectual even. I can recognize Friends as a pretty excellent work of workmanship, I suppose. I think, the modern travails of television show that it's pretty difficult to make a watchable show week in and week out for years. And Matthew Perry was a big part of that. And it seems afterwards, I think why I sympathize with him a little bit more is he seemed to really struggle with a lot of personal problems, a lot of addiction, a lot of other stuff. I think, we probably haven't heard the half of it, but he seemed like a really genuine guy who tried to help others and who were struggling like he struggled. And, he's only 54 and ain't that old. So
that's true.
Rest in peace, Matthew Perry.
It's sad. It's one of those celebrity deaths that reminds you that, they're just people too, but they connect with us insofar as watching them might have been part of our history, but also the characters they played or the people that we kind of thought them to be from their interviews or from, however we have these parasocial relationships. We of course are glimpsing the real people in our own lives and the unknown people that are, our fellow citizens or fellow human beings that have this similar struggles. And I think there's something about grieving somebody who is publicly discussing their addiction issues and is a kind of reference point for something that is usually very private and hidden or secretive even. And it seems like he was going through his addiction issues from the very beginning of his, success on Friends. And that, as far as I can tell, his, co-stars were actual friends. And I think they all developed a very close bond in many ways, as one can do when you kind of find yourself in, spending so much time with people and sharing a kind of special experience that others don't understand. I don't know. It's tough with all the devastation that we see in the world. Every life is special and needs to be thought of as worthy of being mourned, but certain people who everyone knows in that parasocial way can be a kind of reminder of all the others that we don't know. And so, I'm glad you brought that up because yet another sad story. And hopefully people that were helped by him and that knew him can kind of carry on his mission of helping people that are going through those things. So,
yeah. Yeah, and so, I think that kind of segues us into talking about Gaza for a minute. I mean, that's 2 episodes before this. We've been talking about Gaza, but I think that, it's worth saying a few more words on it. So far, we've progressed basically over the last few days into some kind of ground invasion, not a full scale invasion so far, it seems. There was a brief blackout of the Gazan internet. It's very unclear what's happening in there exactly. But there are Israeli troops entering the city, I think kind of like commando units basically. so far, the Gazan Health Ministry, which is controlled by Hamas, they said that there's like 8,000 killed, mostly women and children. The population of Gaza is is like half under 18. Who knows what the genuine figures may be? They could be more than that. Hamas obviously is not a very scrupulous organization, but that doesn't seem at all implausible to me, given the basically saturation bombing parts of Gaza have experienced over the last several weeks. And certainly, many times at this point, the death toll of Israeli civilians killed in the October 7th attack have been killed in Gaza. The Biden administration, basically they seem to be, this is another one of those things where it's very difficult to tell what exactly is happening, because in public they're basically just giving full support for Israel, like maybe saying qualified things like, let's don't kill everyone in Gaza, maybe. Sort of just gestures, but like concrete facts, like the Biden's backing them. Jake Sullivan, the lead, is he Secretary of State? What's his
national security advisor? Is he? Let's see.
National Security Advisor, yeah. And so he was just up in camera saying like, we support Gaza or Israel's right to retaliate against Hamas. And so at the same time, there's reporting, who knows where this is coming from, or what the intention of it is, that like they're working back channels diplomatically, like increasingly heavily trying to persuade the Netanyahu and now Benny Gantz government, the unity government, to like not to reconsider, to like at least pull back on the casualties somewhat, to try to come up with a plan to that isn't just drop more bombs, and that doesn't seem to be working. And that might be why the articles are coming out, like this could be public pressure too, in a sense, like going to reporters and leaking, like this is a very common diplomatic tactic, but it's like, who the fuck knows? But the concrete of it is, Israel is carrying out basically an ethnic cleansing campaign, de facto or intentionally. That's what a lot of the ministers inside the government are saying needs to happen. And the Biden administration is supporting them in all like the concrete ways that matter. That's
right. Yeah.
It's
distressing. It's distressing. It's tough too, because, Biden had this odious quote about, and again, he didn't even say Hamas, which, you have a lot of people focusing on Hamas, even though the thousands and thousands of people being killed are just, Palestinians in Gaza, families and doctors, and, so there's that conflation there that's weaponized. But he doesn't even say Hamas. He says, basically, Palestinians can't be trusted about the casualty numbers, and this is in a discourse that is trying to have international pressure brought to bear for a ceasefire. And this is the thing that has been so, I don't know about you, Ryan, but it's been very hard to watch, especially, we're old enough to remember the war on terror in Iraq and all that, terribleness, but we didn't have social media like we do today. We didn't have so many videos and so many just scenes of devastation. Nor did we have so many like idiosyncratic on the ground reports from the victims and from all kinds of people. And so it's just been really tough to see all of this suffering. And like the elites, the politicians, including the very powerful American government, is not even willing to like forget pressure. Forget public pressure or using the power we have over Israel. They're not even like willing to ask for a ceasefire. And even Bernie, whom we usually love, he like creates a new euphemism, humanitarian pause. Let's have it, he won't even say the word ceasefire. And as we know from the phrase pause means you can just resume the carpet bombing of the Gazans as soon as let's have a little pause. Let's just have a little pause. And it's just like, kind of devastating to see so many people unwilling to have the moral courage to ask for something that just historically, it doesn't matter how partisan you are, it doesn't matter what the geopolitics are, it doesn't matter any of that, to ask for a ceasefire. I mean, people ask for ceasefires even when they know it's not going to happen, just to like reiterate killing bad. Like, let's have peace, diplomacy, find another, right? Like really simple stuff. And you just see these politicians turning themselves in pretzels to avoid just that very basic, lowest possible bar. Meanwhile, you have Israelis saying it's despicable, right, to ask for a ceasefire, a real like perversion of reality. As if what's despicable is the asking for peace rather than the murdering of innocents. So this won't be our focus today because it's something that we could just focus on every episode while this happens. But for me, it's very hard to care as much or think about other things when this is going on and when our government is supplying money and weapons and seemingly, as you said, who knows behind the scenes, but seemingly doing so little to stop all this senseless devastation and violence. Meanwhile, around the world, from New York City to London to Istanbul, massive protests and pressuring of other governments, and UN votes that the U.S. is again embarrassing themselves in, that are not even binding, but just simply asking for ceasefire. So the world is watching right now, and it's not a good look. And certainly the Arabs in this country are, insofar as they were going to vote for Biden, and this is like a year away, so this is early yet, but it's kind of embarrassing to see the standard issue like Chates of the world or whomever already being like, you better hold your nose and vote for Biden. I don't care if your family just got slaughtered because of him, So I don't know. It's tough to think about other things anyway amidst all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to cap it off, I would say what the progression of the violence demonstrates, my best guess is that the Biden people think they can thread the needle, that they can express public support and then privately try to do back channel diplomacy to try to get Netanyahu not to end the bombing entirely, but to not do a straight up genocide, to not actually kill half the people in Gaza. And I think that it's not working because, we should recall the context here with Netanyahu specifically. This guy was fighting for his political life right before this. There were I don't forget how many elections right in a row, 5 of them. And he just barely managed to cobble together a majority with the support of these far right settler parties. He's facing, at the same time, he's facing this corruption investigation and an actual trial for comically blatant kleptocratic Putin style shit that these guys always do. And the only way for him to not die in prison, as far as I can tell, is to preserve his regime. And I think that's why he's been so unresponsive, it's straight up his fault. No matter your analysis of the situation, you can be the most far right Zionist psychopath. Netanyahu was taking the IDF's troops off the border with Gaza and taking them out to go to help the feral settlers shoot Palestinian children. He left the door open, and it was because he needed those psychopath votes to preserve his own political career and his own liberty and his own power. And so to him, I think it's fair to conclude at this point, he doesn't care about Israeli lives. He doesn't care about the hostages. He doesn't care about Hamas. All he cares about is preserving his own power, his own regime. If he goes down, then that's it. And he's going to die in prison. And so, this, you see him lashing out on the deleted tweet where he was blaming the security chiefs, for it's everyone but me. It's my I'm innocent. And a guy like that is not going to respond.
He's like if Trump was even more evil and mendacious and wily and cared even less about human beings. Meanwhile, the government in Israel is about to put through a law to let to let them use live rounds to put down protesters. So that's good. So even the eternal dissent, there are Israelis, not just Arabs, Israeli Jews who are protesting the current violence, and they're very courageous because there's going to be, talk about people who are worried about Trump being elected. Well, Biden right now is not doing much for a much worse version of Trump, who's actively destroying Israel and just a threat not just to the Palestinians and Arabs, but to others as well. So it's frustrating though, because it's very clear the U.S. has material pressure it could apply if it wanted to, and it just doesn't want to. But this is how politicians who care about their own positions of power, they want to think ahead to when their next election is and think about how, in retrospect, at that point, the voters will view what happened. And so we see that there was even something leaked about the Biden administration not worrying about losing Arab support because by then it's a year away, so they'll have forgotten, which is just insane to me. But, I guess all we can do now is just, because that's the thing, right? Our government has the leverage over Israel, notwithstanding the things you said about Netanyahu being kind of a lone wolf who might not respond. But all we can do is call our representatives and apply pressure in various ways so that our government can do the right thing. And other people around the world are doing the same with their governments. It's frustrating though. We won't even make symbolic votes with the UN in the right direction. It's got to be just this backing of quote unquote self-defense. I don't know. It's a bizarro world.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I don't think Netanyahu is going to respond to diplomatic pressure because, he wants this war. And I think he wants it to go on as long as possible, because the minute it's over, there's going to be call for new elections and he's going to lose them by a lot. And so, maybe there's a sense of like doing this type of war crimes and making like all Israelis basically complicit in them too would sort of like back his,
Well, let me tell you, Ryan, our government has a history of trying to overthrow dictators. So like, come on. You don't think if we wanted to, we could try to get Netanyahu budged out of power? Well,
see, that's the thing where like, like there's much more blatant, like if Biden were to be like, listen, in public, like going on Israeli television and being like, this is unacceptable, where you are not going to get our UN Security Council veto free use card. We're going to take that away from you. We're going to take away your weapon subsidies if you keep this up, because we think you're making.
Study your Machiavelli. That's right. Yeah.
And I mean, you think about this from Biden as like a partisan perspective. Netanyahu was going before Congress in 2002 saying it was like absolutely, unquestionably, totally certain that Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons and you should invade. And in 2012, he was straight up campaigning for Mitt Romney. He went before Congress to try to blow up Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. He was over the moon when Trump got elected.
He has contempt. He has contempt for the Democrats.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And like he meddles in elections like Putin does, like just not in secret, just blatantly out there going before Congress to tell the American president, it's like, I want to put up with this shit, and to be like, and I think we would be absolutely within our rights to be like, if you want continued U.S. material support, Netanyahu's got to go. This is, for one thing, his fault. We need somebody else.
Yes.
We don't need
and say to Jewish Americans, this is the proper pro-Israel stance.
Yes,
actually, this is what's. I mean, it just objectively is. Oh man, we don't need heroes for leaders. We just like just do the bare minimum that requires like stating the obvious and having basic moral courage to use immense power, you know?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's people that have moral courage and that are sacrificing their lives that have so little power. So, yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much that.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we'll keep an eye on. There's the weird. Do you want to mention the weird Elon Musk connection? This was kind of interesting. Starlink. Did you see this?
I'm not. I think I missed this development.
So as soon as Israel cut off all the communications in Gaza, Elon Musk said that he would somehow provide Starlink to like nonprofits on the ground in Gaza or something. There was like a tweet about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worth getting into, but in this weird situation where like most of the world is against what's going on right now, and you have, I think even a vast number of Americans, you know, who want a ceasefire. There's been a lot of worst person in the world says good thing situations, you know?
Yeah.
And I think he's one of them, but
impulsive guy. Yeah. Israel's communication minister Shlomo Kari said that the government will use all means at its disposal to fight this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would not be surprised to see Elon go back on that particular promise. He's a mercurial dude.
I was gonna say, you never know what people are thinking. I have a speculation. So I don't know if you're familiar with what Joe Rogan thinks about all this, but Joe Rogan seems to be somewhat pro-Palestinian, and Elon Musk seems to be a big Rogan fan. Goes on his show a lot.
True. And
it wouldn't surprise me if that's the reason. If he's like, you know what, I'm on Joe Rogan's side for this one. I don't know.
Well, you know. I guess critical support for Joe Rogan and this particular question and nothing else.
Strange bedfellows, you know.
Shall we talk about the House Speaker?
Yes. So from tragedy to farce is what we're doing.
Right? Yeah, and probably back again in about 2 weeks.
That's it. So the incompetent Republicans, after I don't know how many attempts, finally got a speaker, right? Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
The most generic name of all time. It almost sounds like a Simpsons joke. I'm calling for Mike Johnson. You know, it's almost like one of that. Like,
yeah. Majority Whip, IP freely, and
exactly. Oh man, and yeah, I've never heard of this guy, and he seems like just a real, you know. Real peach, a real kind of
yeah. He's from
evangelical fundamentalist who denied the election results kind of guy.
Yeah. I think, you know, from what I can tell reading around in the congressional reporting, he basically emerged as a dark horse candidate because he's not a huge piece of shit interpersonally. Like he's polite, soft-spoken, friendly. Kevin McCarthy is kind of like this, like a big backslapping type. He, you know, he's only been in Congress for a couple of terms, so he has like basically no record of fundraising as compared to McCarthy, you know, who was famously like a huge money grubber, loved to backslap and hang out with billionaires and get them to write big checks. You know, as compared to Jim Jordan, who's like professionally a huge dick, you know, like that's all he ever does. It's all he's ever done aside from his wrestling career is a professional asshole. You know, everyone hated his guts. Democrats especially hate his guts. And it's hard, at least at this point, to muster the same sort of visceral hatred from either, you know, because like Jordan pissed off a lot of the Republicans, you know, who like when Steve Scalise was elected as a sort of like, you know, sort of consensus moderate type of person, like the way that the whole caucus thing is supposed to work is like you have your caucus election, whoever wins gets automatically the support of the caucus. And then there were a handful of people who were like, no. And now you have to vote for me when we do the caucus election. And then the people who got burned previously were like, well, fuck you. I'm not doing that. You know, it's just like, you know, student body president shit, you know, that you could, like, you figure out in 5 minutes of actually trying to like run any kind of organization. But when you don't care, when you just want to get on TV and like piss people off, it's fine.
That's right.
But so there were multiple failed votes for Jim Jordan, including like him sicking his psychopath murderer followers on like, the recalcitrant holdouts, or like 20 of them that grew over time. They started getting death threats, from the Jordan heads. And it just didn't work. And so now Mike Johnson steps in as basically like, well, nobody knows who he is, so we can vote for him. And he's not a giant douche.
I miss John Boehner and his tears. That's
Loosh. Fucking.
The original OG orange man in DC. The fake tan with the tears. But yeah. The second. I mean, I guess Gingrich would be the first one, but yeah, Boehner. I remember reading his book, which is actually kind of a fun read. John Boehner's memoir, because it's like clearly he wrote it himself after drinking like 6 bottles of wine, And he was also clearly an alcoholic. That's right.
Big time smoker and drinker. Read the book himself. He has like kind of a pleasing voice, and he's just like stuck in little improvisations. By the way, Ted Cruz, fuck you, and stuff like that. But he talks about all the crazies, who basically forced him out of the speakership. And it was like, you cultivated those people. You pandered to all these lunatics to promise them the moon. And then when it turned out you had to actually compromise to govern, they were like, oh, give us the moon. Like, I can't, that's impossible. It's very far away and very big. And they're like, fuck you, get out of here. And that's.
No, it's like if you, were getting into dog fighting and you just, created this monster dog that you abused and abused and abused, so it'd be as vicious as possible just so you could unleash it on others, and it ended up attacking you. Yeah. Oh no. Damn you, dog.
Who could have predicted this dog would bite somebody? Yeah. And back to Mike. So interpersonally he's pretty polite. He's not a sort of gleeful, vindictive jerk like Matt Gaetz or other folks, but he is really conservative. He's like super anti-abortion. I think he supports like a total ban, no exceptions or only minor exceptions. He's a big time, not only anti-gay marriage, anti-gay sex. He wants to return to, what was it, Lawrence v. Texas, pre-2003, when they criminalized sodomy in a bunch of conservative states.
So, Bowers v. Hardwick, before Lawrence. Pre-Lawrence.
Right. Yeah, pre-Lawrence.
Yeah.
And so, like right-wing evangelical Christian, quote unquote, like that. This is all Jesus ever talked about was abortion and gay stuff. Never any money changers involved in Christianity. Let's not be bring it up. Don't look for it. Don't keyword search the Bible for money changers. Doesn't happen. Not in there. He was also, I think, involved. He was centrally involved, in fact, in the January 6th effort to overturn the election, not through the violence, but through crackpot legal theories. He was a guy who came up with he invoked the independent state legislature doctrine to say that mail-in voting was unconstitutional, and therefore you could say that any state that had mail-in votes, you could just throw those out, and that means that Trump would win, and therefore, open and shut case, Trump's now president. And previously, a lot of conservative, the less like Looney Tunes conservative Republicans in the House who are like, they're grasping for some kind of intellectual like finger holds to be able to justify this, are like, well, we can't listen to Sidney Powell. She's got bees coming out of her ears. She's clearly nuts. Whereas this guy, he had just like a thing that sounded buttoned down, even though it's every bit as insane as anything Rudy Giuliani or Sidney Powell or any of those other chuckleheads ever said. They're just like, yeah, let's just throw out the votes for the other guy, and it's Constitution says you can do it. It's just that easy. Boom. And, and like 150 Republicans are like, wow, that's so smart. I'm voting to overturn the election. And so I would say this guy's maybe even more sinister than Jim Jordan. You know, he's just like the same exact shit that's more effectively packaged in a, you know,
that's right,
pleasing,
a more polite package.
Exactly. Yeah. And possibly more effective. But
so we should be, you know, it's tough to be scared in the sense that they struggled as a party to even get a speaker for so long that their ability with such thin margins to do almost anything seems like, I don't know, but they certainly will obstruct very well, I guess. And look, you know, they don't have the Senate or the presidency anyway, but like, it's a big bummer. Remember when we thought we might even get the House in the midterms, and then, you know,
almost
slipped out of our fingers there. Yeah. So,
well, this may be. One more thing, actually, before we close off the speaker discussion, I want to mention that, you know, it's like they were so proud of themselves. Like, we elected a speaker. It was like the shit that happened.
They want the gold star.
It was like, not only happened automatically, it took us 15 votes to elect the first one, and then we got rid of him for no reason. And then it took us like another 10 votes to get a second one. You're like, wow, we're so good. It's like you walked into your house and turned the lights on. Damn, I'm like a construction genius. But what got rid of McCarthy was the fact that they, as you said, they don't control the Senate, they don't control the presidency, and there's a bunch of must-pass stuff coming up: aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, you know, stuff that the Republican Party itself views as sort of non-negotiable. And so how are you going to pass it? Well, you're going to have to rely on Democrats because of the insane people. And then what's going to happen then? Are they going to turf him out too? And then you're going to have to find another guy who's just, you know, out of nowhere. Put a Groucho Marx mustache on him, and so now his name is Jake Monson. And but so I don't know. Maybe they were so humiliated by this last progression of just like absolutely self-imposed fumbling idiocy that they won't do it again. But I would not bet on that at all.
I would not bet on, the Republicans' sense of shame. But what's possible? You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. Stranger things have happened. Well, in other terrible national news, should we talk North Carolina?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is worth mentioning as, sort of indicative of the national mood. So the state Supreme Court in North Carolina flipped back in 2022 from Democrat to Republican, and they therefore issued a new decision that partisan gerrymandering is just fine. And so they have just recently passed extreme, like maybe the worst in the country, gerrymanders at both the state and the federal level. So both the state house and the state senate are gerrymandered to piss. The state congressional districts, there's 14 of them. It is now 7-7 because the 2022 election was basically a tie. And there were district boundaries that were imposed by a federal judge that were like more or less fair. That would probably be 11-3 with a Republican gain, maybe 10, maybe 11, depending on the turnout. So a gain of 3 to 4 seats, which I believe right now they have a margin of 4 seats or 5 seats. So, you know, we're talking about potentially hugely nationally significant changes in how one part of the legislature is governed, and also like at a state level, democracy is done in North Carolina. Elections are pointless; they mean nothing. Democrats cannot win, even in a wave election for Democrats. Probably, according to the analysis I've read, Republicans would retain a supermajority in both houses of the legislature. And, I would say Hungary or Poland are more democratic than North Carolina is, but in Poland, the opposition, they cobble, despite a whole bunch of cheating sort of along these lines.
It's amazing.
The every other opposition party from far left to far right, they got together and they assembled a coalition because they're, people got sick of the incumbent, as happens, and now that's completely impossible. Permanent Republican rule, absent some, there's going to be court challenges, but the Supreme Court has said that gerrymandering is fine so long as you don't do it on like explicitly race grounds. But they've also ruled that if you do it on explicitly partisan grounds through the mechanism of race, then that's fine somehow. And
yeah, you can use race as, and didn't use. This is not what the precedent used to be, by the way. No. It changed with the composition of the court. But with the court swinging so far to the right, they said it's okay to use race as a proxy for partisanship, right? And that's somehow not a violation of the Equal Protection Clause or the Due Process Clause. So, yay democracy.
Yeah, I think the most convincing, the reason why you want political competition, and the phrase in the Constitution is like one of the duties of Congress is to make sure that every state has a quote unquote Republican form of government. Small r, thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, well, what does that mean? A lot of conservatives say, well, we're republic, not democracy. But it's like, you could point to republics that they didn't have like universal franchise, that they have like property qualifications, that sort of thing. Roman Republic, that was that women couldn't vote, poor people couldn't vote, slaves couldn't vote. But what there is, and I think it's fair to say, like if you're a republic, you have legit political competition, that regardless of how you draw your sort of, you chop up your electorate, you can't just cheat, you can't.
No. In fact, let me rant for 1 second about the republic, not a democracy. That whole distinction was because the founders meant democracy in the sense of direct democracy, in the sense of like self-determination through active participation in policy making and voting by all citizens, not through representatives, but through, like in Athens, for example, the lottery, where like you would just get picked, and then go in and be in the government for a while, and then you come back out, and it's just like everyone had to come in and out and be involved with most things. There's certain things that were reserved for expertise, like treasury or being a general, something like that. But they had, in ancient Athens, juries of like 500 people. And that's what it was like, more democratic, meaning the demos, the people were just involved in everything, in the governance, policy making, law making, and administration, and so forth. So like representative government was coined, I think maybe by Hamilton, actually. I think he coined that term, representative democracy, representative. Yeah. So like representative democracy was like kind of an oxymoron initially. And so that's where the republic is the same concept of like self-determination, res publica, the public thing. Like it's a place where the people are represented, but not necessarily through the demos itself always being involved, but through representing, like the representation of the people's will and the people in the bodies that are, composed of people who are their representatives. And so that is the idea of democracy as it became, used in colloquial, terms over time. And so now to use that kind of distinction as a way to say that we can just like ignore the people's will or override it or make it impossible for the voice of the people to be heard. Well, that's a perversion of what republic itself was supposed to be, right? Which is just like a different way to represent the good of the people and have self-determination through this system. And so, this is not a functioning republic, what's going on. So it's not democratic, and it's not Republican in the small r sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what was the first words of the Constitution? Like, we the people.
We the people.
Not this random 20% of the people. They get to do everything. They get to make all the decisions, and everybody else has to just shut up and take it. That I think, you could make lots of criticisms of as I was saying, the bunch of slave owning aristocrats who wrote the Constitution and stuff. But the idea that you could just have one political faction that just like rules over everyone else, and there's no way to get rid of them, regardless of who votes for what. It's outrageous. It's like, this is why they fought the revolution in the first place. It was exactly, in fact, I would argue, I'm not a historian, but like the impositions and the duties that the British monarchy was attempting to impose on the colonists were not like terribly onerous at the end of the day. It was like, pay for this, pay for that. And you sort of, I think it was as much of a sort of cultural thing and a mismanagement of the relationship on the part of the British government as it was like, just terrible, we're like looting the entire place, turning people upside down and like emptying their pockets of coins and taking them up, it was a lot, more, contestable in that. And that's why a lot of the, people like Dr. Johnson, so like, why do we hear they thought we were a bunch of hypocrites, to some degree we were. Why do we hear the greatest yelps for liberty from the drivers of Negroes? Whereas here, it's like you have a system which is set up on an explicitly sort of like representational basis. It's like, this is how you're drawing these boundaries to determine like who is going to be represented in a way that explicitly and blatantly and intentionally undermines the entire purpose of doing that in the first place. It's like, it would be more honest to just have a dictator, this guy's in charge and none of this voting shit means anything. So don't bother. You're not going to get to do it. And, so it's like, it pisses me off, I guess I would say.
She should. That's right. Not good. You are right to be mad. It's important. This is maybe a silly small point, but it's important to have, and this is like an Aristotelian point too, is to have the right emotional responses to things, and so, in Greek, thumos is the spiritedness and the source of kind of your righteous anger. There's like a tripart soul that Plato talked about, and he says the three parts of the soul, the reason or logos, the will or appetite, and then the thumos, the spiritedness, or it's like, if you think of like the head being the reason, the heart being kind of where your thumos, your spirit, your courage is. It's like Rocky he's all heart, right? He's all thumos. But also that's what we think of people who go to the defense of others or who are outraged by injustice. And so, a well-formed soul orders those three things. Well, to do that, you have to like understand intellectually, the injustice. Some things are maybe visceral, like when you see the images from Gaza, should be so, you can like almost straight bypass the intellect because it's so obviously unjust that you go straight to the thumos and have the righteous anger. Although some people can reason and abuse the use of their reason and rationalize away. This is what Rousseau said. Reason is dangerous because animals have the instinct to not walk past a dead being, an animal, or it's something they have pity for naturally. But our reason changes our way of response and makes it less natural and lets us override that natural sympathy and pity. But here, the fact that you're so pissed off is a great sign because it's aligning those three things. And so you have the will to want to do something about it. And that's where like the people rise up and will do something, so that these people abusing their power don't keep, doing what's wrong. But there are all kinds of ways from media to ideology to just harming people economically and otherwise that makes it hard to respond in those ways, because it can change our emotions to apathy or cynicism. It can change our kind of response to make us dissociate. And so I don't know. That's why these newsy episodes can be good, to refocus on what should we be attending to together? What should we be feeling something about? And so
well, and I think to your point, you get down to sort of political brass tacks. It's like, what is the point of having a representative government, a democratic institution. And one of the big ones is to prevent political conflict from spiraling into violence. You know, it's like you channel the conflict into the electoral arena, and then you resort to like a facially legitimate and easily replicable, decision process, namely the election. And then that, provides a legitimacy for the governing party to rule for a limited length of time. And then you could just do that again and again. The folks who lose, they lick their wounds. They go back, say, we'll get them next time. We're going to change our platform.
That's right.
We're going to find some new leaders, whatever. Rather than I'm going to the country, I'm going to get my people. We're going to get guns. We're going to fight it out in the street. That historically very common.
Right.
It's happened many, many times. History of the Roman Empire, dozens of occasions where it was just who has the loyalty of the soldiers, or the soldiers just put a guy on the throne themselves. They pick somebody. They're like, you're the dude. And I feel like Republicans maybe sort of don't realize what they're playing with. It's like they always think that they can just cheat and cheat and cheat, and the other party is just going to lie down and take it. Like historically, for the last decade, when they first did that in Wisconsin, I think that's probably the most extreme form of cheating starting in 2011 since the end of Jim Crow in 1965. Liberals have, I think they're so bewildered that it just sort of they couldn't really believe that it was happening to them. But now it's sort of starting to sink in, I think, and so you see people like Representative Tricia Cotham, or Cottom, I don't know how you pronounce that. So this lady was elected in like a plus 20 Biden district on a strongly abortion like message, then double crossed her constituents by switching to the Republican Party and giving them a supermajority, which allowed them to pass a really stringent abortion ban a few months ago. And now she's been given a new district that's like Trump plus 15 as a reward for betraying, her basic duties as a legislator, and just like pissing in the face of every North Carolinian to think that they deserve honest representation and like a legit campaign instead of some deep cover Republican op, And just to think that you could be like just sort of, I'm just going to enjoy my future political career being a Benedict Arnold against a voter of my own state and not have any qualms about it. I think maybe you should have some qualms.
That's right. No, and look, it's true that, as much as we can critique the founding or any number of political elites in our history, Madison, as the kind of architect of the Constitution, was concerned, insofar as he was anti-democratic in the sense of wanting a representative democracy or a republic instead of direct democracy. It's because historically direct democracies were not stable and were only specific to small populations and small territories. And then the problem of empire is a problem of a bigger territory. So he was trying to kind of figure out a way to have stability. That's like Federalist Number 10. It's the first, purpose of a well-constructed union is to, prevent and control the violence of factions, and factions being, groups that are united in interest or passion against other groups or against the common good. And, it's something that it's frustrating because you have your establishment Democrats, your centrists, your liberals who kind of freak out at what's happened with the Republican Party and MAGA and these lunatics. And yet they won't recognize the truth spoken by leftists about the corruption of the Democratic Party establishment. And they don't understand that if you want to have like a vast transformation of our polity away from this kind of stuff, there's a reason why people thought that these crazy MAGA people were going to drain the swamp and shit. Like, even though they themselves are the most anti-democratic and corrupt figures in political power, they were running on a kind of faux populist anti-establishment platform because many people do rightly see that they're not represented and that their interests are not considered and that they don't have real influence. And so until, we actually address that, not just with the Republican crazies, but just generally in our system, and we move away from plutocracy and oligarchy. It's just another reminder about the relationship between fascism and plutocracy and oligarchy, right? Like that they're symbiotic. And that's something that we can't think of as a problem that's just on one side of the partisan aisle. So, and now hopefully a lot of people are seeing that fascist and genocidal instincts are something that Democrats are fine with supporting. So, it's another reminder that we're going to go through another presidential election where it's going to be the whole lesser of two evils thing, and you're going to get the same tired discourse. But really, we all need to think about how to transform the whole system from repeating these dynamics. Because the cycle of violence in the Middle East, we've got our own cycle of violence here, politically, economically, and otherwise, that we need to think about too. So
yeah.
Before I forget, one last thing on Gaza, just because we didn't mention that the hostages' families have been incredible in understanding that what Netanyahu's doing and what Israel's doing is not at all in the best interest of their loved ones, and is not at all oriented to releasing the hostages. And so, have you seen this call, this everyone for everyone, this idea of having, because there's a bunch of course, Palestinian hostages held by Israel, and this everyone for everyone is kind of this brilliant idea. Just exchange all of the hostages on both sides, like it's reciprocal exchange. And it also matches this idea, everyone for everyone, as a kind of broader kind of maxim, like everyone should care about everyone, like everyone should support everyone's lives instead of these mendacious leaders who are not caring about anyone.
Yeah, there's a fellow named Marwan Barghouti who has been in a Israeli jail since 2002, I believe. We ran an article at the Prospect arguing that he should be released. He was, I guess, one of the organizers of the first and second intifadas, and so people could say. Some would argue, that he's not like Nelson Mandela in that he, has a history of advocating violence. But the thing about that is Nelson Mandela also advocated violence. He was all for his armed struggle. And it was only when he was like caught and put in jail that he became, cottoned on to sort of the value of nonviolent protest. And basically the same thing has happened to this fella. And he is by far the most popular leader in the Palestinian territories in Gaza or the West Bank. And, if you, as you said, you could do a sort of like everyone for everyone, that would include this guy who, if you wanted a credible negotiating partner, somebody who could actually implement some sort of a lasting settlement between Israel and Palestine, this guy would be it, just like Mandela. Warts and all. Mandela had many of them. And so, it's like to the extent that they're not considering that at all, so as far as I can tell, I think that tends to demonstrate, the families of these hostages are correct to sense that Netanyahu doesn't give a shit. He will kill them all. He's after to save his own hide. It's the only thing he cares about. He doesn't care about the people captured by Hamas or the people who are under the future threat of Hamas violence that may come. It's not his priority.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a great point that you're making, because it reminds us that's the kind of imagination that we need right now, because it's easy with the deluge of death and destruction and the savagery that is being supported by the powers that be, to remember also that there are many possibilities that you just thought of, that others are thinking of, that are being thought of by the hostages' families. Many situations, because I was asked in a DM, I need to respond to it still, but I'll respond to it here, I guess, is, when we talked to David Cleon, maybe even in the last episode, whether it's a two-state solution or a one-state solution, both seem very, very unlikely. And the third option is genocide, of course. But like, just because right now it seems unlikely to have these, to have peace and to have diplomatic solutions and to have a kind of transformative change in ending the occupation doesn't mean that it's not possible. Doesn't mean that that's not what we should focus on. And I was asked about other models for this kind of thing, and none of them are exact, but of course the analogies by definition have something similar, something different. But like, whether it's South Africa that you just talked about, or whether it's Northern Ireland, I mean, I remember, don't you remember when thinking, okay, there's never going to be peace. Like the troubles, as it were, right, seemed really intractable. And so that's something that reached a peaceful, at the time when you're in the midst of it, it does not seem possible, right, in those kind of situations. And yet we've seen the impossible happen. And so I think it's wrong to focus on, there's no exact, this goes back to Marx. There's no recipes for kitchens of the future, right? We don't need to know exactly how yet, in order to agitate for the thing that will be new and that will give the peace and justice that's deserved. And in retrospect, we can learn from it, and we can learn from the past successes now. But that was a great idea that you just came up with, because it just shows the kind of creative thinking we need. And more than anything, we need people pushing for attempts at peace with bare minimum calls for ceasefire and beyond, right? That's just the first of many, many steps that follow the opposition of the people who don't care at all about peace. So, yeah.
Yeah, I should clarify. This article is by a Berkeley professor named Jerome Karabel, so it wasn't my idea exactly.
Nope, your credit. You get all the credit. It's all yours. You're the managing editor of the Prospect. All the credit to you. Just kidding. No, we should link to the article. Though. I meant credit to you for bringing it up in the context of this conversation. Credit to the professor for writing the article about it, and we'll link to that as well.
And I would say, maybe just to cap it off, it's like what was the prerequisite for ending the Troubles? Well, it was people on both sides who wanted the Troubles to end. And I think that's, if you're an Israeli looking at this situation and being like, there's not a way out of here, and this could go horribly wrong for us in about 1,000 ways. What you got to do is you got to get rid of Netanyahu. If it's never going to be fixed, not in terms of Israeli security or the lives of Palestinians or anything that you could justify wanting to have. As long as he's in there, he's going to screw it up.
Yeah, that's right. At the very minimum. That is, so it's not sufficient, but it's necessary.
Yes.
And the same thing to everyone that's focusing on Hamas or anything else. None of that matters if Netanyahu's in power. None of that matters.
Right.
And in fact, we don't have influence over Hamas. We have influence over Israel, right? And the people in Israel have influence over their own government. So absolutely. Yeah. Well, that was a much more hopeful ending to the episode than I thought we'd have going in, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know. It certainly looks horrible, but, things can sometimes turn for the better all of a sudden without, it does happen in history sometimes.
When we, the people around the world, rise up, right, against tyranny, then the new constituted ways of being are formed. So,
yep.
That's the true constitution worship that people in this country should think about, right? Actual emancipatory, liberatory solidarity against injustice around the world.
Great. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you in the next episode.